Okay, let's be real for a sec. When it comes to moving without pain, we've all heard a ton of advice, right? Like avoid this, do that. It's almost like it's part of our muscle memory. But what if, and stay with me here, what if some of that advice we've heard, what if it's actually leading us in the wrong direction? So that's what we're doing today in this deep dive, separating the facts from the fiction, the truth from, well, the stuff that might not be so true. We're tackling those movement myths we've all heard, things like knees over toes will absolutely wreck your knees or that cracking your knuckles. It means you're going to get arthritis later in life. And we're going to use science to get to the bottom of it all.
Yeah, and what I think is so interesting is how we just kind of accept these myths as like, almost like gospel truth, simply because we've heard them a million times, right? So we're going to look at the research, the articles you sent me, the expert opinions, and really unpack this whole world of pain, movement, and really how to keep your body healthy and active, not just for now, but for years to come.
That's what I like to hear. I'm so ready to unlearn some of these beliefs that I've held on to for like way too long. So let's start with something we all experience. Pain. I mean, we all know to stop if there's like a sudden sharp pain. Like if you stub your toe on that darn coffee table leg, that's a no-brainer. But what about those more subtle aches and pains we feel? Is all pain a sign that we need to just like stop moving completely?
Well, the key here, and this is where it gets really interesting, is understanding that pain is a spectrum. It's this like complex language that your body uses to communicate. All the sources we're diving into today, they really emphasize this point. Pain is a signal. It's not a dictator. So yeah, if you have acute, intense pain, that needs immediate attention. But that kind of soreness you feel after a good workout, or that stiffness from sitting at your desk all day, well, that kind of discomfort, it might actually benefit from, get this, more movement.
Wait a second. So more movement could be the answer to some types of pain.
Yeah.
I feel like that goes against everything I thought I knew about this.
Yeah, no, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? But think about it this way. Our bodies were designed to move. One of the articles you sent over, it cites a study on lower back pain. And the people in the study who did regular, gentle exercise, they saw significant improvement compared to those who mainly just rested.
Okay, so instead of avoiding movement when we feel discomfort, we should actually consider that gentle activity could be part of the solution. That's a pretty big shift in perspective.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not just for back pain either. It applies to a whole range of conditions, even arthritis. The research, it actually mentions how controlled movement can be really beneficial for managing arthritis pain. So it's about finding that sweet spot, the right type and amount of movement. Something that helps reduce inflammation and improves joint health, without, of course, making the pain worse.
Gotcha. So it's all about listening to your body and understanding that. Pain can be nuanced. It's not always black and white. But okay, let's tackle another myth that like we've all drilled into our heads. Never let your knees go past your toes.
Oh, man.
I swear every gym teacher I've ever had, that was like their golden rule.
Oh, tell me about it. Huh.
Right. This is one of those classic movement mantras. But if we actually dig into the research, like one of your sources did, what we find is this advice, it's a little oversimplified, It's not so much about the knee position itself, it's more about having proper form, how the load is distributed, and the strength of all the muscles around your knees.
So it's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes the knee going over the toe, it's actually okay, maybe even good for you. Exactly. In fact, if you restrict your knee movement too much, it can actually create problems in other areas, It can put too much stress on other joints or mess up your technique. The research that we're looking at, it really stresses how important strong glutes and quads are, They help support the knee joint during those big movements like squats and lunges. It's all about building that solid foundation of strength and mobility.
Man, you're making me totally rethink my entire squat form. But while we're talking about exercise routines, let's bust another myth that I think a lot of people use to dictate their recovery. Rest is king. Now, of course, I know rest is important. We all need it. But is it always the absolute best solution for every ache and pain?
You hit the nail on the head. Rest definitely has its place, especially after you've had a tough workout or if you're injured. But what we're really challenging here is this idea that complete inactivity is the answer to all kinds of discomfort, right? In fact, one of the articles you sent me had talked about a study on tendinitis. And get this, the people who included gradual, controlled movement in their recovery plan, they actually healed faster than those who just rested.
Wow, that's fascinating. So are you suggesting that instead of thinking of rest as just doing nothing, maybe we should think about it more like active recovery?
Precisely. It's about finding that middle ground, engaging in gentle movement, doing some stretching, or maybe some light exercise, something that promotes blood flow and helps you maintain mobility. Without overstressing your body. It's about helping your body heal, not just totally immobilizing yourself.
Okay, this is making me want to completely change my post-workout routine. But let's move on to a myth that I'll admit I've been carrying around since I was a kid, that cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Is there actually any truth to that? Or is it just one of those old wives' tales?
Well, I'm happy to tell you, you can crack away without worry. One of your sources, it totally debunks this myth, that popping sound you hear. That's just gas bubbles collapsing in your joint fluid. It's completely harmless.
No way, are you serious? All those years of my grandma telling me I'm gonna get arthritis, it was all for nothing.
Well, hey, let's give Grandma some credit. She was probably just looking out for you. But, the article does clarify that while cracking itself isn't a problem, if there's any pain or swelling along with the cracking, that could be a sign of something else, something that needs to be checked out.
Okay, good to know. I feel like I'm letting go of years of unnecessary worry every time we bust one of these myths. But let's talk about another pre-workout ritual that's been getting some attention lately. Static stretching. Like those classic toe touches and hamstring stretches we all used to hold forever. Is that really the best way to get ready for a workout?
So while stretching is definitely important for flexibility overall, the research actually challenges the idea that doing those static stretches right before exercise, that it's the most effective approach. Studies have actually shown that holding those stretches before you get active, it can actually make you weaker and reduce your power output.
So we're basically telling our muscles to relax right before we ask them to work hard. Doesn't seem like a good strategy for peak performance.
Exactly. What the research is saying is that dynamic stretching, which is, controlled movements that take your joints through their full range of motion, that's a way better way to warm up your body for activity.
So instead of holding a hamstring stretch, I should be doing things like leg swings and walking lunges.
Exactly. Dynamic stretches, they activate your muscles, increase blood flow, and they get your body ready for exercise without making you weaker. Save those static stretches for your cool down when your muscles are nice and warm and ready to relax and lengthen.
Another myth busted. I'm starting to realize how much we just take for granted when it comes to exercise and movement. But before we get to the next round of myths, let's tackle one that's practically become a fitness mantra. No pain, no gain. Is there any truth to that idea at all? Or is it just a recipe for injury?
Okay, so let's break down this whole no pain, no gain thing, because it's a bit more complicated than just pushing through pain, right? Yeah, it's true that challenging yourself is important for making progress, but the research, it really emphasizes this key difference between discomfort and actual pain.
It's funny because I think so many people, myself included, we've been kind of programmed to think that if it doesn't hurt, that we're not working hard enough, you know what I mean? But I'm starting to see how that kind of mindset, it can actually do more harm than good.
Oh, absolutely. Pain is your body's way of saying, hey, something's wrong. It's like an alarm system. And if we keep ignoring those signals, well, it can lead to injuries, setbacks, and even chronic pain down the road. There's actually one study, it's highlighted in one of the sources you gave me, that found a direct link between overtraining and an increased risk of stress fractures in runners. That's pretty serious.
So how do we find that balance between pushing ourselves and also, respecting our body's limits? It's like this fine line between challenge and caution. And honestly, I'm not always sure where that line is.
The key is to really learn to listen to your body's signals. It's unique to you.
Okay.
So some discomfort during a workout, that feeling of your muscles working, your heart rate going up, that's normal. It's often a good sign that you're making progress. But if you feel any sharp stabbing pain, or if the pain gets worse as you exercise, that's a clear sign that you need to back off a bit.
This is making me realize that I need to pay more attention to those little cues, those whispers from my body, instead of just, powering through and hoping for the best.
Yeah, it's a skill, it takes practice, but trust me, it's so worth it. And remember, progress, it's not always a straight line, Some days you'll feel super strong and energized, other days you might need to take it a bit easier.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about another myth. This one might hit close to home for some of our listeners, that as we age, we just naturally lose mobility. I mean, it's easy to start thinking that way, right? We see our parents, our grandparents maybe slowing down a bit, struggling with certain movements, so we just assume it's a natural part of getting older. Is that really true, though?
Well, it is true that our bodies change as we age. That's just part of life. But the research, it paints a much more hopeful picture. One study actually found that adults in their 70s and 80s who did regular strength and flexibility exercises, they actually had major improvements in their range of motion. And their overall fitness, pretty cool, huh?
Wow, so even as we get older, we still have the power to maintain and even improve our mobility. That's actually pretty inspiring.
It is. It really highlights how amazing our bodies are, how adaptable they are. It's not about trying to, turn back time. It's about embracing aging, but also taking steps to support our physical well-being as we go through it.
I can already picture our listeners years from now. Strong, flexible, and moving with ease. Love it. Yeah. Okay, let's tackle another myth that might be holding some people back. The idea that strength training will make you stiff and less flexible.
Ah, yes, the classic beefcake stereotype, right? All those images of super bulky weightlifters who can barely touch their toes. It's a common misconception. One of the sources you sent me, it really dives deep into the science of strength training and ability. It makes it clear that when you lift weights the right way, it can actually make you more flexible.
Hold on, how can lifting weights make you more flexible? That seems kind of backwards.
Think about it this way. Those big compound exercises, like squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, those kinds of movements. When you do them correctly, using a full range of motion, they require your muscles to both lengthen and contract through their full capabilities. So you're not just getting stronger, you're also maintaining and even improving the flexibility of your muscles and joints.
So it's not just about how much weight you lift, it's about how you lift it. The form and range of motion are key.
Exactly. And one of the articles even suggests adding in some dedicated mobility exercises to your routine, along with your strength training, that can really boost your flexibility. It's like a whole body approach to movement. Strength, flexibility, and control, all working together.
Okay, I'm definitely rethinking my approach to both strength training and flexibility now. But let's move on to our last myth for today. And it's one that's it's deeply rooted in our culture, the idea that more exercise is always better. Now, I love pushing my limits, but is there a point where too much exercise actually starts to work against us?
That's a great question, and it's tempting to think that more is always better, right? But one of your sources, it makes a really strong argument for the importance of rest and recovery. It talks about a study that found that athletes who constantly overtrained, without enough rest days, they actually saw a decrease in their performance. And they had a higher risk of injuries, even hormonal imbalances. It's not good.
So even with something as good for you as exercise, there's still a real risk of pushing ourselves too far.
Absolutely. The main takeaway here is that our bodies, they need time to recover and rebuild after we've pushed them hard. Think of rest as a crucial part of the training process, not a sign of weakness.
I wonder if maybe the fitness industry is kind of, promoted this go hard or go home mentality a little too much. What if we started focusing more on listening to our bodies and making rest and recovery just as important as pushing our limits?
I love that. That's a really powerful shift in perspective, and it's something that your sources definitely support. It's about finding that balance, challenging yourself, but not pushing so hard that you burn out or get injured.
As we've been debunking these myths, I'm starting to see this pattern emerge. It's not about following strict rules or going to extremes. It's more about being mindful about movement, approaching it with a sense of awareness, balance, and respect for our bodies and what they need, which is different for everyone.
It really feels like we're discovering a whole new way of thinking about movement, right? It's less about all those rigid rules and more about, tuning into our bodies and finding what feels good, what we can actually sustain over time.
Yeah, it's funny. As we've been talking, I've been thinking about my own relationship with movement, and I'm realizing how many of these myths really shaped my own beliefs and habits. I'm definitely guilty of pushing through pain, thinking that rest was for, people who weren't serious. And I even started believing that as I get older, my mobility is just going to, inevitably decline. So this has been eye-opening.
It's amazing, isn't it, how these messages just become so ingrained in our culture. But I think that's what's so cool about these deep dives, It gives us a chance to question those assumptions, those things we've always believed, and then hopefully make more informed choices moving forward. And it's never too late to change, to rewrite those old stories we tell ourselves.
So true. Okay, let's do a quick recap. Our mission today was to debunk some of the biggest movement myths out there, using science and all that great research you found as our guide. And I think it's safe to say mission accomplished.
Yeah, we definitely challenge some long-held beliefs, like that pain always means stop, or that your knees should never go past your toes. And we learn that rest, well, it doesn't have to be complete inactivity.
Right. And we busted that myth about aging and mobility.
Yeah.
With the right approach, we can actually stay flexible and keep our range of motion. As we get older, who knew?
And let's not forget about that more is always better mindset when it comes to exercise.
Oh yeah, that was a big one.
Your research made it super clear that rest and recovery, they're not optional, they're essential for a sustainable fitness routine.
So out of all the myths we debunked today, what stands out to you as the most, maybe the most important takeaway?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's realizing how individual this all is. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to movement. What works for me might not work for you, and what your body needs today could be totally different from what it needs tomorrow. It's all about paying attention, listening to those subtle cues, and making choices that support, well, your overall well-being.
Such a good reminder. And it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about, right? Pain-free movement. It's not about some perfect ideal or pushing ourselves to the limit. It's about finding joy in movement and doing it in a way that, feels good and that we can keep doing for years to come.
Exactly. It's about creating a healthy relationship with our bodies, one that's built on respect, awareness, and really understanding our own needs.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm leaving this conversation feeling inspired to move differently, to challenge those old beliefs and approach my own fitness journey with a little more, a little more curiosity, a little more awareness, for sure.
Oh, I love that. And for our listeners who are feeling that same spark, I encourage you to think about the myth that really resonated with you today, the one that maybe made you think, maybe I need to rethink this. And ask yourself, what would it look like to let go of that belief? How could it change your approach to movement, to exercise?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And for those of you who want to keep exploring this whole world of pain-free movement, well, we've got something really exciting coming up in our next episode. We're going to be diving into how to build your own mobility toolkit. We'll be talking about the essential tools and techniques that can help you move better, feel better, and really, unlock your full potential.
It's going to be awesome, so stay tuned for that. But until then, keep moving, keep learning, and don't be afraid to question those old ideas about what your body can and can't do.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of movement and well-being.